This is a quick video to show how adaptive components can be used. This one panel is at the beginning a generic model that has parameters established, and then it also has adaptive points at the corners. So when we create a pattern and we place these adaptive points, we can design our form based on these nodes, and then that one pattern is placed into a family of divided surfaces, and then ultimately that file is loaded into the project. So it starts with the smaller box, and then the pattern, and then the family with these divided surfaces, and then load it into the project. So let's go through an example of this being kind of a basic shape, this box, and then we'll start to work with more complex shapes. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this project and anything that I have open so that we can work with it again. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is create a new family, and that family is going to be based on, if you scroll down, the generic model adaptive. In this generic model adaptive, we'll use these little point elements to create here 4 point elements, and then we can select these point elements, all of them, and up here make them adaptive so that when we place them into our pattern, we can pick whatever form we like, create whatever form we like. Now we're going to select here a couple of these adaptive points and pick the spline through points, and then select these 2 points and use spline through points. And that using a spline will give us the flexibility of picking points anywhere. And so you're creating the spline through the points. We're going to select here the splines, and then in the properties dialog box we'll put a check mark in is the reference line so that those become reference lines and not just splines. You can tell they're reference lines because they're green instead of that original blue. So now we have adaptive points and we have reference lines that are actually splines. So I'll go ahead now and select these reference lines and create a solid form, choosing here the box form for this one, and then we'll pick this small temporary dimension icon to make it a permanent dimension. I'm going to go ahead and pull this out here, and we'll make that a basic parameter. So I'm going to select this dimension. I made it a permanent dimension, and I'll come over here to label in the options bar and pick add parameter. Here we'll just use something simple like H for the height and pick OK. Now we're going to save this one, and just to keep it simple we'll save this one as box, and then we'll create here the pattern that we'll put this box into by creating another family. So we'll go up to the big R there and down to new and family, but this time because it's the pattern that we're going to be using, we're going to create one using a pattern using generic model pattern based. So we started off with the adaptive form, and now we're creating a generic model pattern base that we can put that form into. And this one already starts out with these reference lines. We can go ahead and select the reference lines and create a form. But this time we'll pick the surface, and then we'll select that surface so that we can pick divided surfaces. And because these are real small, these lines here, I'm going to go ahead and change the U and the V grids to something a little smaller. The numbers, I'm going to change the number to 6. And you'll see how the grid gets a little bit bigger because there are only 6 boxes, grid patterns across compared to the 12 that we had. We'll hide the reference lines by selecting them and then picking the little sunglass icon at the bottom and picking hide element. And then we'll go to the top view using this view cube. We need to turn on the nodes so that when we bring our box into this pattern, we can click on the nodes. The way to do that is to select the grid and pick surface representation. We'll pick the small arrow in the title, surface representation, and then put a check mark in nodes and pick OK. Now let's save this one as pattern. And then to switch back to the box so that we can bring it into this pattern, we can either use Control Tab, or in the Quick Access toolbar at the top left, you have this icon that has these 2 windows. You can click the little arrow there and go back to box and then pick Load into Project. What it does is it brings you into the pattern, and now you're ready to pick points to establish your shape based on those nodes. Okay, so I'm creating a shape here based on adaptive points, and those adaptive points are coming from the box file and into this pattern file. If we go to the isometric view, you'll see that the height is too high for this pattern, so we'll just select one of those boxes, and then in Properties pick Edit Type, and there's your parameter that you established. We can make this a lot smaller, like maybe 1 inch, and because it's a parameter that's attached to all 4 of those shapes, they'll all change automatically. Now we can get to the 3rd level and create a new mass family. So we'll go to New, and we can go to New Family, go to Conceptual Mass, and there's your mass family there. And now that we're in the mass family, this is where we actually draw the actual whole wall, the entire piece that I showed you from the beginning. So I'll go ahead and draw a rectangle, and then select that rectangle and use Create Form to create here a form, and then with this top surface highlighted, we can pick Divide Surface, and clicking out in space, then using your Tab key to make sure you're selecting the whole mass, you can select the mass and then use here this little sunglass icon to pick Hide Element, so that we just end up with the divided surface that we'll use. We can save this file as our family file. and pick Save. And now we can go back to the pattern and load it into this family. So we're going to go back to the pattern because we started off with the box. It was placed into the pattern. And now we're going back to the pattern. And we can load that into the family. When we load it into the family, the pattern is loaded, but we still need to apply it to our divided surfaces, so we can select the divided surfaces, go to the type selector here, and you'll see the new pattern that we created under rectangle, because we started with something basic and only used the rectangle pattern for the divided surface. I'm going to go ahead and click on pattern. And by clicking on pattern, we're taking that pattern and we're applying it to this family. I'll go to the top view. It's real small, but there it is. So this is the family that has the box inside this divided surface. And now we can load it into an actual Revit file. We'll start a brand new one, a new project, and then switching back to the family, we can load it into our project. So because the show mask mode is not on, Revit will automatically turn it on for us, so we'll go ahead and close out of that. And then we're going to pick place on work plane, but we could actually place it onto a surface. And here's our wall. I did make it kind of big. Okay, so here's our wall. I'll go ahead and click to place it. Going to the 3D view, you'll see that we created this pattern that's on top of this mask. So we can go to Mask and Site tab and pick Show Mask by View Settings, meaning that the VG, if I typed in VG, the Visibility Graphics dialog box does not have a check mark under Mask. If I click this, see the mask disappears. So there it is. There's our pattern.